And some persons have become so intelligent they can manipulate the lower nature of another man for profit or governance, to control, to make them easier to control. And it's almost as if the system we live in was designed to wean out those who in the natural world would get picked off by the predator. Because inside the system, if you go to nature and a gazelle is chewing the lovely green grass and he takes that extra bite whilst the rest of his herd look up and they're alert, they're conscious, they're aware. The one who indulges too heavily in the green grass gets picked off by the lion. If you look at the world around us and those persons who are saying, I've been dealt an unfair hand, this is not right, I want to change the world, but they should do it because they're rich, I'm not. And you look at something like pornography. Arguably, the biggest addiction in modern society that's not being spoken of is pornography. Those persons who decide that they're going to use pornography every day, spill their energy every day, masturbating every day, degrading the very sacred nature of who we are every day, they are the gazelle taking one extra bite of grass and in the framework of society getting hit by the lion, which is their lower nature, which is either profiting the creator of that pornography either with money or by being able to control you and keep you subservient so as you are not competition to the will and the structure that the humans who are more disciplined have expressed, manifest and are building on the planet.
Last night I saw a blazing stallion coming through the fields of Lebanon.
Hey guys, so I want to talk about a very important topic. We've all heard about natural selection, and in the predatory sense, the best example I can give is the buffalo effect, whereas a herd of buffalo has the strength, it has the power to stand its ground against any predator if it acts as one. In moving, however, quickly, they tend to separate the old from the herd and then the old are picked off, thus strengthening the ability of the herd's movement at speed, avoiding any injury. That's pretty much in effect a good outline of natural selection. The old and the frail, or sadly in nature, the disabled, etc., the injured, they are most likely to lose when it comes to the game of life, when it comes to surviving against predators, etc. They are most likely going to die. In our modern world, of course, I'm completely opposed to the idea that we humans should face natural selection in that way, or I would not be doing what I am doing. Some persons on the planet believe in it. They believe because they are wealthy and they are powerful, those who are not wealthy and powerful don't deserve the compassion and the empathy of those persons because they failed. And thus, some persons even believe inside certain societies, such as Fabian socialism, at least the founding fathers, I'm not saying those who follow it today, that it would be better for unproductive members of their ideal of how humans should live on the planet should be executed. Or that you just don't bother if they're not inputting into society. So if you are a disabled person, a topic which is very dear to my heart, I love, as if they are my own flesh and blood, a great many special needs children, and long may it continue. However, with that mindset, then you would say leave them behind, because it weakens the species. We are using resources that we can be using to strengthen ourselves and push forward on the weaker parts of our species, and that's no good. That's the idea of natural selection. It's the law of the jungle, basically. It's the law of the natural world. And the law of the natural world is not something that I wish to worship in its entirety. I know that I can improve on the natural world. I recently did a video about the Maasai using factory manufactured mosquito nets. We save children, men and women in the Maasai, by providing those nets for them to sleep under and reducing the instances of malaria, a horrific illness that I've experienced myself. So when you begin to look at the natural selection of things, you can say, in the most part, our society is not set up like that. We care for one another, we look after the weakest of ourselves, we have facilities for the disabled, we have compassion, we have love, we have empathy, we have the higher ideals of humankind, which make us a being and not a primitive primal animal. The primal state is not unknowable. There is nothing unknowable about our primal origins. There's nothing unknowable about the primal urge in me as a man to be a provider and a protector. There is nothing at all wrong with that whatsoever. There is nothing wrong with the very normal primal aspect of my wife to be a protector of her children and also to not take as much of a role as wanting to go out into the world and fight to provide. This is a natural part and a noble aspect of the natural world around us. It doesn't exist in every species. If you look to the lions, for example, the females do all the heavy work, the men do the fighting and the territory. The females do all the hunting, etc. Now, that all said, what I want to point out is you are not free of predators. And I'm not referring to sexual predators, to give an example, or something of that nature. I'm referring to the predatory nature of the very way that our system has been created. And I'm referring to the predatory nature of a part of your own being at the same time. Now, let me start on the part of your own being, because it's an age-old story you've all heard me say. The lower nature of man, the lower nature of yourself, is predatory upon the higher nature. It wants dominion. It wants to overindulge in the fleshly pleasures, and it's a very difficult and fine line to walk to... I've got a hair in my eye. It's a very difficult and fine line to walk to ensure that you stay in the higher ideals and those things are put to one side. It's not an easy task. It truly is not. Lust will destroy a marriage or a relationship pretty quickly if it's not toward one another, if it's toward other persons I'm referring to. Sometimes our society is so heavily built on the lower nature, on lust, on primitive sex and so on and so forth, that we lose sight of the higher nature. And those who dwell inside a more loving higher nature, they are seen as something obsolete. It's almost as if that can't be true. They're viewed with suspicion. How can you truly just be loving? How can that be? How can a person just have an open heart and truly just have vulnerability and vulnerably fall in love like they do sometimes in the world? Many people will always think there's some hidden agenda. I faced that in my own life because I was surrounded by people who were caught up in their lower nature in the most part. So the ideals of the higher nature were a little bit alien to them. The love and the forgiveness, and thus it's easier to judge and come from that lower place. And that is the age-old battle of the predator within each and every one of us. That predator is within me too. I have recently conquered that predator in quite a profound way in my life in the recent weeks, because that predator within me had started to form for some time, the worst ego I've ever had, a spiritual ego. An ego that felt that its actions were constantly necessary because it was in service to God. But even actions in service to God are not always coming from a state of being, coming from the presence and the love of God. They can come from the carnal mind imposing itself on that aspect of your energy. The carnal mind imposing itself on your want to serve and to love and creating its own identity from there. This must be stopped. To give a prime example, if that is not clear enough, just one last prime example on the lower nature, the inner predator. Someone the other day told me that veganism is the highest of spiritual ways, and I said no. It's got nothing to do with spirituality. It's about love and empathy, and it's the highest moral road if you are deciding to sacrifice your use of eating animal products for the higher ideals of love and not harming others. It's the highest moral road in this culture, in India, it was decided upon to be the same. If you look at a culture like the Maasai, that is not true, because to sacrifice not eating those things would probably be more detrimental to the well-being of your tribe, your home life, because you would have to leave an environment where that's the only thing that Mother Nature will provide for you. So I said it's not true, it's the highest moral road, but if you attach to that and you say that makes me spiritual, you've begun laying a block, and that block is the first block of your spiritual ego. And I've seen this many times when I was more involved in that movement, and I've since backed away because of all the struggles I have with it now, after realizing that it's not the answer to everything, and living with the Maasai and seeing that those guys are hurting the environment less than any vegan I know, but eating meat. It was very complex, and realizing this situation is not straightforward. Abandoning factory farming, there's no discussion, we all know this. However, to say that makes you spiritual is to construct a spiritual ego. What's the other predator that's lurking? The other predator that's lurking, let's call this humans seeking to benefit off of the lower nature expressing itself in other human beings to give them more freedom inside the worldly state of desires. The example I want to use is pornography. Many men and women will complain about the state of the world, say they haven't been dealt a fair hand. They'll look at those who have a little bit more, have earned their way into having a lot more comfort and abundance. And once you get to that state, you have the three states. We have the survival state, where we are seeking to survive, and you can't really grow spiritually there. That's why the introduction of building walls is a massive thing, because you can start to develop and grow inside of them. That's where the religion of Freemasonry was born, the idea that their ancestry were the first to build walls and thus cut away from the natural laws of the natural world, and thus were developing into more advanced beings. That's where that stems from. That's the origin of the beginning of their religion. When you are living inside the world, as it were, and you have persons seeking to make benefit of the lower nature of another so as they can get more worldly desires, pornography is one of the key tools I've seen to do that. People will complain, he's got more, he should fix the problems of the world. Number one, all of those persons who are complaining, saying that, when they are reflected against a child I know out in the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro, you will see that the money that they waste on frivolous endeavors, such as getting drunk, or I use the example of Christmas crackers on the table, to a child who is labouring in a quarry, it's measurable in wealth as the millionaire to the working class European or American citizen, in the most part, because that child's life can be changed if you agree to surrender a few of your non-utilitarian purchases and indulgences in life. Likewise, you feel that your life can be changed and bettered if the millionaire surrenders some of their non-utilitarian indulgences and pleasures. And thus the cycle goes on. The transformation comes when we acknowledge that, when we realize that, and we come from a place of finding the absolute state of sharing, and in that the absolute dependence on God, and then the absolute solid relationship with faith, which very few find their way into. And when they do, you get torn out of it constantly. Well, I do it all the time. You get into a state of absolute faith, you know God's providing, but you freak out and you start thinking that you're responsible, and what if this doesn't work out, what if that doesn't work out? And God is always there watching and saying, I'm going to make this happen as long as you meet me halfway and follow my command and make sure you make space to hear my command and my instruction. You're going to meet me halfway, we're going to be okay. But you can lose that space quickly. I digress, however. Until we get to that state, it's a frivolous pursuit looking to others to fix it, because then you realize the problem's internal. The problem in every human and the problems of the planet are coming from the lower nature of man. And some persons have become so intelligent they can manipulate the lower nature of another man for profit or governance, to control, to make them easier to control. And it's almost as if the system we live in was designed to wean out those who in the natural world would get picked off by the predator. Because inside the system, if you go to nature and a gazelle is chewing the lovely green grass and he takes that extra bite whilst the rest of his herd look up and they're alert, they're conscious, they're aware. The one who indulges too heavily in the green grass gets picked off by the lion. If you look at the world around us and those persons who are saying, I've been dealt an unfair hand, this is not right, I want to change the world, but they should do it because they're rich, I'm not, blah, blah, blah. And you look at something like pornography. Arguably, the biggest addiction in modern society that's not being spoken of is pornography. And I guess that's due to many reasons. For instance, who wants to say, my New Year's resolution is to stop porn? Not many people are brave enough, but they can say smoking, drinking, to exercise. They can say that, but porn, our society hasn't made sex as loose and free to be able to say that. But if those persons are using pornography, it's almost as if the system was designed to say, you're the gazelle who's taking too many bites of grass, and here comes the predator to take you out. Because there's no natural predator for humans on this planet anymore, but we as humans can predate on one another. And in predating on one another, it's exactly what we see inside almost the design of the world that we're living in. Those who spend too much time surrendering themselves from being conscious in the present moment, the origin of the word sin, to come away from the conscious experience of what is happening now, and in doing that you enter the state of sin. Those persons who decide that they're going to use pornography every day, spill their energy every day, masturbating every day, degrading the very sacred nature of who we are every day, they are the gazelle taking one extra bite of grass, and in the framework of society, getting hit by the lion, which is their lower nature, which is either profiting the creator of that pornography either with money or by being able to control you and keep you subservient so as you are not competition to the will and the structure that the humans who are more disciplined have expressed, manifest, and are building on the planet. I always say in the ancient language, the lion was the lower self. So it's a perfect analogy. If you want to invite the predators of this society to take a bite out of you, then you keep using those things. You keep unconsciously creating the habit, being addicted to the endorphins and the dopamines and the artificial release of them, which is killing your brain, killing your body, killing your view of the world, killing your confidence, killing your abilities. You do that. But you have then no right to envy those who are excelling inside the framework that is present. Because it's like the gazelle, whilst he's being eaten by a lion, saying, this isn't fair, he should have been eaten, not me. And the others are like, hey, you took an extra bite of grass here, and I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying I get with it and it's fair. I'm sure the other gazelles looking at that one getting ripped apart feel empathy and think this isn't fair. But at least what they can then do is tell the others around them, don't take the extra bite of grass. Don't do it. And then you will stand a chance at elevating yourself for your next generations to have a better grasp and grip on the stage of life. Now it's not just, it's not something I'm saying this is okay to have, but this is the way it works. And this is our society, and I think the question is it designed that way, or is it just a natural occurrence because we are from those rules and regulations of the natural world? But I say it's not a natural occurrence because, as I say, we break the mold of that law of the jungle, law of nature. We break the mold. We can look at our sick and our disabled and we can say, I'm going to help them to be happy because I empathize with their position. It's not fair that they are like that and then struggle and suffer when there's no need, when I as an able-bodied person can do something to assist them to make their life better. We break that mold, and thus I can only assume that those humans among us who don't have the empathy to do that, who believe in the natural selection of things, might well have designed it. So as those of us who dwell inside our lower nature and behave like a very primal, something that's you can easily anticipate its movement, something that's huntable, then they create snares to catch them and to say, yeah, you're not going to excel here. In fact, because you're going to drag our species down by getting hooked into these things, I am going to benefit and profit from you by either controlling you to elevate me in power and keep my way of life going on this planet and my freedom in all of the desires I want, or I'm going to take money from you to do the same thing by making you indulge in these uncontrollable aspects of your lower nature. And thus we do have predators inside our society, only they're not hunting your physical body to die, they're hunting the way you think, they're hunting your consciousness. And the predators exist everywhere, in things like pornography, media advertising, ideas about which drugs you should consume and which you should not. All of these things are predating on you and your consciousness to the benefit of somebody, either to the benefit of an ideal that certain persons are holding, or to the back pocket of somebody who wants to indulge in more of building their ideal or the material pleasures of the world. And thus, when you are complaining about the state of the world and saying your life is not just and you've been dealt an unfair hand, ask yourself, am I that gazelle who's taking an extra bite of grass and inviting being bitten on the behind by the predators, the lions of my society, my lower self, and those trying to manipulate my lower self to gain profit in governance or monetary terms? And if you can identify that, you're very much at your first step of truly starting to manifest and free yourself from the matrix and the chains of Babylon. Because that is ultimately, when you indulge in things like that, what you are agreeing to. I enslave myself to Babylon, and my lower nature feeds the growth of Babylon, whilst those at the top benefit greatly and we at the bottom suffer greatly in exchange for temporal pleasures, exerting our energy in ways that are not conducive of creating the best version of who I am. Watch out for the predators, guys. Don't take the extra bite of grass. Find a way to stay conscious, so when that lion comes, you can say, no, not today. God bless, guys.